and webinar skills. I mean, that's really something I think we're all going to need to learn in the future, specifically as leaders, to be able to really probe and ask questions, and even from afar, because we can't just wait on national meetings for everything. So I really applaud this, the Lashley Leadership Program and the Young Alumni Learning Series for really putting this together and making this available. So next slide. So today's lesson, we're really going to focus on leadership philosophy and style, and I put underneath there one perspective. So I'm going to try and dive into my perspective on it, because there's literally a ton of literature on leadership philosophies and style. So I don't want to make this a strictly academic lecture and just stick to the literature and the theory and Harvard Business Review types of stuff. I really want to kind of let you dig into my mind in regards to leadership philosophy as one perspective. So you need to develop your perspective in your career, in your work environment, with your colleagues, and make the right fits for the right moves for your organization and for your patients. So I'm going to kind of dig into mine, and then we can ask questions about it and reflect on it and add other perspectives, so especially during the chat. And I think we're going to be utilizing the chat box for those types of things on your webinar, as well as we're going to unmute and allow some time for discussion. So next slide, Mary. Well, basically, let's first come up with what's the definition of philosophy. And two major terms I came up with is the rational investigation of the truths and principles of being, knowledge, or conduct. And I like the second one a little bit better, a system of principles for guidance in practical affairs. And our practical affairs are operating pharmacy systems, and so that's where this context of philosophy is going to stick. We're not going to get into religious philosophy and other types of things. We're going to stick to pharmacy practice in our common box here, if you will. So next slide. So one of the interesting things is I've been asking my students, residents, whether they're advanced practice management residents, first-year residents, students, every time I have one on rotation, I ask them to present their personal philosophy, and believe it or not, I'd say about 90–95% of the time people don't have one. And what I liked about this article that I'm referenced here is that I've been doing this for so long and asking people, but I didn't think about writing to ask people to and putting it into the literature. So this article by Lamb and Trapskin happened to be a resident of mine. It was at the University of Kentucky, and he was a pharmacy practice management resident. But he has gone on to the University of Wisconsin and done some great things there. But what he does is he asks all his people to write down their philosophy. And I thought I should have wrote an article on that. Would have had another publication. But nevertheless, I write it down. It should be a balance of realism and idealism. It should be a guide or a compass for you. You really should contemplate it and revise it. And I can tell you that I honestly look at my personal philosophy about every 2 to 3 months, and I tweak it, revise it, or get re-energized by it. But I do think you should write down your personal philosophy. Next slide, Mary. So in this, I think in the article, as well as I think in thinking about your philosophy, you ought to have some self-reflection questions. And these aren't necessarily the only ones that you should have, but these are some examples of the ones that you might want to think about. So what's your vision for pharmacy practice? What are your professional values? What goals do I have for my patients and staff? What are my desired relationships with patients, staff, and the interdisciplinary team? So well, on this slide, Herdick, I've got a little Purdue Boilermaker down in that lower right corner, and that must mean we're going to stop the train and maybe talk about this a little bit. So do you have any thoughts to maybe generate a little discussion here?
Absolutely. So first off, I have to say I absolutely love the fact that you used the Purdue train on this, so that's awesome. It's nice to see the Ohio State flag with a little Purdue on it. And then also, I do want to, before I dive into some of these self-reflection questions, just thank some of the folks from, that have attended today. And one of the things we really wanted to do, which I think really embodies Cliff's philosophy on leadership, but also on learning, is to include those folks that aren't just necessarily former alumni of Ohio State. It might be residents of those people, colleagues of those people that maybe are somewhat connected to the Last Relay Leadership Program. So really do want to welcome everyone on the call. So when I look at these self-reflection questions, one of the things comes to mind, and I like, John, that you went over this development of your leadership philosophy, because one of the things that I've done is I have not only a leadership philosophy, but almost what I call a leadership or personal mission statement. Just like a department of pharmacy would have a mission statement, or a corporation, I have my own personal mission statement, which essentially acts as my guide as I move through different personal and professional decisions. And so it's really neat to say, okay, how do these questions here play into that mission statement? And so I would like to probably try to see if we could open up the lines, or maybe have people raise their hand, but I'd like to talk a little bit about the vision for pharmacy practice. Because when I look at the vision for pharmacy practice, I'm thinking about those items that play directly into the practice advancement work being done at ASHP and other organizations. But what do we want pharmacy to be, and what should we be doing essentially 50 years from now? And so I want to almost take your question, John, and then flip it a little bit and say, what should pharmacy be doing 50 years from now? And see if anyone on the call wants to maybe speak up or offer some thoughts, because I really find that interesting as we look towards, well, then what should the vision be based on what we think we should be doing?
And while you're waiting for people to click in on that, and Mary, if I've got some additional self-reflection questions on slide 7. So during this time, if you can flip to 7, and then maybe after a minute, flip back to 6, and then back to 7, just to give folks an idea of the other ones. But here's things about work culture. Why is it being a pharmacist important to you? What do I want in my desired practice, and how can I achieve my desired practice? And those are some other self-reflection questions to possibly consider going into your philosophy development.
So do we have anyone that raised their hand on maybe where or what we should be doing in 50 years from now? I'd be really curious to get some thoughts from those folks on the call. Maybe we could start. Hey, Bob, I hate to put Bob on the spot, but Bob, do you have any thoughts on what we should be doing 50 years from now, or what we were doing, and maybe we've progressed, and how that's maybe shaped what our vision should be, and then maybe that would be a good start for us?
Well, thank you, John. I was going to talk, but I just didn't know if other folks wanted to talk. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. I would think, and I was just telling the residents in the room here, I would think that we would be very, very independent practitioners as part of a team, that we would be well established as providers. And patients would actually make appointments with us to take care of things. I think we'll also be more focused, and I think our roles will be more similar to physicians in many ways. There will be pharmacists who will have maybe lots of hands-on patient care activities that are very similar to physicians, maybe even have some roles that are quite similar and overlap. But I see us as being truly being providers, where we're seen by the public as providers, and people come to us, pay for our services, and obviously benefit from our services. So thank you very much for asking me, John.
Well, and from my perspective, just to add in, since I don't see much in the chat box, I would just dial that 50. You said 50? Maybe yes, too far out in advance, John, because I'm thinking I want this in a couple of years. So I think Bob laid out a good vision, but I'm looking at that quicker, and I think we're already doing it. Matter of fact, I just think we need to get the provider status nationally to do some of these things. So anyway, that's I'll tell you what, let's move on, and then if we want to talk about that some more, we can. But let's move on to slide 8, if you don't mind, Mary. And just to emphasize that there are a lot of leadership theories out there and a lot of lessons, I found this article by Holford pretty good. So just to give you a little bit more, maybe homework if you're interested in looking at some more things, I thought this one was a really good article. But let's go on to slide 9. And just to reveal some of my philosophy statements, and my first one, it's kind of like a Coveyism that got modified a little bit, but I first stated some of my personal things to really live every day like it's your last and enjoy every day, really love one another, love other people, laugh and enjoy yourself. I mean, really, I try to work laughing into meetings, where appropriate, of course. But really, I think it's important to have a good opportunity to have fun, to learn every day. Matter of fact, every day I'm looking forward to what I'm going to learn, and finally to leave a legacy. So what's have you left after you're gone? And and then what culminates in me, because I've been a skydiver, is it's jump when you're ready. In other words, you don't want to jump before you're ready, or before your chute is all set to go. But jump when you are ready, but by all means jump. And what I mean by that is I wrote that into my last Chalet speech when I won that award in '05. And if you wanted to do that, take a look at that. I provided the link for that. But that talks about vision, training, tools, and mentorship as being some of the keys for your success there. But really, to me, that means you need to work on preparing yourself for something, and whatever that something is. But then you've got to take the action. You've got to be definitive and go accomplish it. And to me, that fits into so many things of life. And as a skydiver, it probably means more to me than other people. But I think some things really need to dial up in your style, your enthusiasm, your movement to kind of really motivate you. So, Mary, go to the next slide, slide 10. We put together a bunch of staff at a representative group of staff here at Alumni Memorial Health System, and it's a 4-hospital system, about 250 staff, 1,500 beds, and went through a process of deciding what are we here for, and everybody should have their own mission, vision, professional philosophy, and so forth. But these 7 words really exactly mean what our staff are driven towards, and the optimizing patient outcomes through interdisciplinary medication management. And one of the things about philosophy statements, and I've been in many other centers before, in academic centers and other practice sites, and I've seen very complex missions and visions of what the departments can do, and they look very nice on paper or in a policy and procedure book. But my view is that every staff member should live the vision of that department. And if you walk up to one of our 250 staff members, I bet you everybody can tell you OPOTIM, which is just the acronym for those words. So they're really here to optimize patient outcomes. I mean, that's our sole purpose. If you said pick 3 words, to optimize that individual patient outcome. And then how the heck are we going to do that? It's through interdisciplinary medication management. And I find generally pharmacists think they want to do the interdisciplinary, but they need that extra push to really be that key team leader, team member, and then potentially team leader to perform that activity. So anyway, those are our 7 words, and John, I put a little Boilermaker down in that lower right-hand corner to kind of indicate, see if you have any thoughts or you want to stimulate any conversation on that.
Yeah, I do. I actually do. And I really like these 2 personal and professional statements you have here. I'd actually be curious, John, and Bob or anyone else that wants to chime in, how has your personal or professional philosophy matured or changed over time? So if you were going to write this as an early career professional, in the first 5 or 10 years out of your program, what would that have looked like compared to what it is today? Has it morphed? Has it changed? And what were the factors that went into that change?
Well, just start off, because I threw my statement out here. I would say earlier in my career, probably we focused on, I don't know, safe, accurate, rational, economic utilization of pharmaceuticals or drugs, in the healthcare setting. And as the focus was probably on the drug. And I think we've really moved, at least in my organization now, and I practice at some fine institutions, but really focus on the patient as that's what we're here for. And like we would lay down everything we could professionally to serve that patient. And that means counsel and educate when we don't have time to do it. Or it means any aspect of the care delivery that a pharmacist can provide. Focus on that patient outcome, and as opposed to thinking that we do our pharmacy work in the box well and not march it out to delivering that patient into the home environment. As we look at transitions of care, continuity of care, I mean, I'm really enthused about that new wave of, relatively new wave of emphasis of pharmacy, because really we can fix them up in the hospital, but what's more important is that they are able to maintain themselves or keep themselves well when they're home, and that's where they really desire to be, in that optimal patient outcome environment.
Thanks, John. That's really helpful. And Bob, obviously want to offer the opportunity for you maybe to chime in, and then even Mary Alice. I think I see Mary Alice Bennett on the call, and Nick Hahn and others, just to welcome their thoughts on how their philosophies have evolved over the course of time and what factors maybe influence that evolution.
Yeah, John, thank you very much again for asking me to comment. So my initial thoughts were that I was practicing pharmacy, and I was more focused on the sort of the operations and mechanics of being a pharmacist, and really didn't understand how what I did impacted a patient. And obviously I got cancer and had chemotherapy, and then I understood very quickly that meeting patient needs, patient comfort, and really focusing on that was really much more important than just the mechanics of doing the job every day. So the patient and the patient at the center became very, very important for me, and really drove everything that I did: patient needs, patient comfort.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate that perspective. Mary Alice or Mick, do you want to comment on that at all?
This is Mary Alice. I agree with Bob that there was a shift at one point in time when it was being a part of the team and pleasing physicians, moving to being the advocate for the patient. And I think that's really where we're growing right now, is being that extender to the patient versus being the extender of the physician. And it's a very, very narrow line, but I think really a very critical one in making an impact on patients' outcomes.
Thank you, Mary Alice. Really appreciate that.
This is Mick. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I guess one of the things that I've experienced over the years is that I think when I first started out, my leadership style was more not as inclusive as it was closer to the end of my career. And there's just a lot of people out there that have a lot of skill and knowledge that sometimes we don't take advantage of. And so I think that we need to really encourage people to have their input, because if you're talking about bringing about change, you have to either sell the people up front or on the back end. And it's a lot better if you try to sell them on the front end and let them be involved.
Absolutely. Well, great. I'll tell you what, Barry, let's advance to next slide. Good thoughts. Thanks, Mick. Mary Alice, appreciate it. Just to kind of fully to show you a little bit more of my professional philosophy, and I think the key is that you develop one for your own setting, not so much that this is the right one to do. Once again, this is one perspective. So to advance, expand, and promote Lee Memorial Health System pharmacy services in an enthusiastic and consistent manner at all LMHS facilities in which pharmacy is recognized as a leader in the state of Florida, advancing practice and care to patients in Southwest Florida. So, so really I get charged up with this in what we're doing in our non-academic setting, because previously I practiced at Riverside and Ohio State, as well as Cincinnati and then University of Kentucky. So I had the advantages of being in highly progressive academic medical centers to come into a community environment and then kind of embody this type of approach of excellence that we're seeking in our community setting is really a big challenge. And actually, that's another reason that I came to this setting, because as a career confirming process for myself is to see if I could do it in a community setting. And I think we actually are. If I look at, since the 5 years I've been here, that we've moved to Lee Memorial Health System is probably the leading health system that's presenting at our local or at our state society meetings in regards to new information, posters, doing presentations, whether we've had 2 presidents in the past 5 years that were FSHP presidents from our site, and really becoming known in Florida, not necessarily nationally, because I think there's other large, high-profile academic centers like Ohio State that do that on a national basis. But in Florida, I think we're on our way towards doing that, and I think really advancing the practice in a number of ways, whether that's emergency department pharmacists at all sites, emergency department technicians, or responding to codes and strokes bedside, every MET call, every malignant hyperthermia call, whatever it is, to really provide the highest level of bedside care with our pharmacist and with our excellent support of our pharmacy technicians. So anyway, next slide. This one is another one that really is our confirmation of our investment in our staff, so contribute to providing an environment and culture for personal, so individual people, so personal and professional growth through encouragement, continuous professional development, which actually also is in line with my ASHP presidency, to really promote that aspect of wherever we are, we need to advance our own development and education and training. But development, recognition, and utilization of skills, talents, and strengths, so really applying the strengths of our individuals. So, John, I got another Boilermaker there in the corner, so any thoughts or reflections or points to ponder at this point?
Yeah, thanks, John. I'm a little curious, I think, as I think through your professional statement here and think about, it's a paragraph that encompasses a lot. So what are some of those factors that you've used over the course of your profession in the course of your career to then mold into this statement? Is it family stuff? Is it all professional? Is it your vision, personal vision for pharmacy? Is it other factors that maybe we haven't considered? What goes into creating a statement like this?
Well, I think it really includes the employee engagement. I mean, you really need to have people loving where they work and enjoying their practice, and to be constantly on the side of thinking, well, what should they be learning next? And so, for example, I think if I'm digging too deep into the weeds, let me know. But for example, I think the continuing education program for pharmacists, as designed by the ACPE, is antiquated and not directed towards education. It's directed towards people getting basically 15 hours worth of credit, whether or not it applies to them in their practice, just getting it to meet a legal requirement. I think every pharmacist, as well as in our institution here at Lee Memorial, every technician needs a continuous professional development plan where they utilize the skills or the techniques identified in the ACPE document for that. So I won't go fully into CPD, but the idea being that everybody has got a reflective process to look at what do they need to know for the future, and then really enact that plan and look for ways that we can enable people. I view my major role, as opposed to a director, they should call me system encourager, because my role is really to move and have our 250 staff members think about what could they be doing next for their patient or learning more so they can improve the care of their patients. And I guess that's where my passion lies. So it's more than these words on this on the paper. It's really saying that we need to continually look at how we can be better for our patients and utilize the skills that we've got.
Well, John, I really appreciate that perspective because I'm reflecting on my own leadership philosophy, and I can already tell and sense a shift in my own as probably when I started off, it was super professional and only looking at one way of doing it the way we were taught, and not using as much emotion into some of the decisions you make. But then you move forward into your career and you start working with staff that need developed. You start encouraging your personal life and some of the inclusion of that into your professional, and that ends up molding your leadership philosophy in a lot of for me, unanticipated ways, which has been really nice to reflect back on. But I can already sense that my mind will continue to evolve over time, and so it's interesting for me, and I'm sure a lot of the other folks on the call in my similar position, to know what some of those factors were and where the focus is as we develop these types of philosophies.
Yeah, and I think I view this as a professional integration of your personal goals along with the professional goals that makes you one person, and that really gets into a matter of whether you got. I know in especially of recent interest, there's been work-life balance issues. I don't look towards the balance. I look towards the integration such that it works in your life as opposed to it works in your separate lives of work and in your home life. So I think looking for that integration that makes it all come together is really the best target.
Oh, absolutely. And maybe I'll stop you there just to see if there's anyone that wants to comment on that, because I think you've touched on a real important piece of this whole leadership philosophy, that integration of work and life. And I like the word integration too. So does anyone want to add to that? Bob, others on the call, either raise your hand or type in the chat box, or we can unmute you as well. Okay.
Okay, well, Barry, let's
go ahead, John.
Let's go on to slide 13. And just to extend a little bit on the professional philosophy, but we won't dwell here. But it's really expanding training programs, and I think by expanding training programs to not only residents and students, but don't forget your pharmacy technician students. For example, in my environment, they are half of my workforce, a vitally important component of my workforce. And really what we want to do is we want to create those highly trained individuals. And once again, we're not an academic medical center, but I think embedding training into your programs makes you even better, and because you're constantly on that learning and teaching edge. So next slide. So just to dive in a little bit more on a little bit related things would be personal professional achievement goals. And this might be something that you might want to think about, especially if you're a resident or an early practitioner. Do you have some baseline things that you attempt to achieve? And here's a couple of mine, that my annual minimums on the external basis, so leaving alone my internal activity, is I've always thought, okay, every year one national publication, one national presentation, one national professional society activity, and then one state or local professional society activity. And actually, for my last resident that was in, we decided to look at this because I'm getting old in my career, so why not just take a look and see how I've done on some of my things. So let's go to the next slide, Mary. So here's a little graph of Armitstead's career presentations and publications. The red line represents my presentations, and I knocked out anything local, so those aren't graphed here. But if they were state level meetings or national level meetings, they're indicated in the red line. And then my publications, and I'm never really was going to be the biggest publisher, but that's been part of my flow. They're more descriptive types of publications than they are true benchwork research, although I do have a couple of publications in emergency department journals, neuroscience journals, and even a transplantation journal, which that's pretty good for an administrator, quote-unquote administrator like me. Anyway, you can see early in my career I wasn't doing so well, but then I decided to do a residency by year 3, so I wasn't a straight out of school resident. I was a staff pharmacist that became a resident. So, and then that started popping up there. But anyway, I just think it's interesting to think about what types of things do you want to do that you want to say whether you've done a good job that year or good job in your career. And I set presentations and publications as things that are out in the front. So let's go to the next slide. Next slide indicates participation in professional society. So I think this is another thing that it kind of helps you in your life, but also in your career. So let me describe this one. The blue represents local and not just membership. I'm talking about local participation, at least a committee or a task force or something of that sort. Red being the state and yellow being the national. Along the bottom, you see a purple, yellow, purple line. And what that represents are my major changes in cities during my career. So you see my first couple of years as a staff pharmacist, really I just went to work and I did my 15 CEs a year and called it quits. And then I went into the residency, so that first yellow bar, so there, and then residency, then Ohio State, and then back to Riverside. So that represents what I did there, and that first blue star in that is my COSHP presidency. So that's the first time I was a president of the local society, represented by that first star. And then I progressed to my role in Cincinnati, which is that purple line down the bottom, representing there. That's when I was president of OSHP. And then moved on to Kentucky, and that's I should have made it a blue bar, I guess, but nevertheless, it's a yellow bar there, and it indicates when I was the KSHP president, and then finally that purple bar, and I hope to have a long purple bar in that last one because I'm at Lee Memorial Health System, but that last star is the ASHP presidency. So once again, my goal was to have at least one local or state activity that I was in, more than membership. Paying your dues is a start, getting active and having activity, and after that, how about leadership in that professional society? I think this is something that should be throughout your career, and look at how you're going to build that. So looking back at a 30-plus year career, that's what mine looks like graphically. So I just thought it was interesting. Next slide. So, I mean, my point is to, for my next section here, is to, first of all, know yourself as an individual. Then I think you need to know your team. And then you got to determine your direction, your priority, develop a plan, execute that plan, and evaluate your status, or constantly evaluate your status. So, I don't know if a words of wisdom for me is really, that's 7 short statements on what you need to do. But let's go to the next slide, Mary, and see if we can develop this a little bit. I think a good way to start are Strength Finders 2.0. Many of you probably have done that. I think I find that many people do this and they shelve their data. They thought, oh, that's interesting, then they kind of pack it away. So let's go to the next slide. We really use ours on a regular basis, and this profile shows the leadership team that I've got at Memorial Health System, and the fact of I had dominance in the area of execution, and relationship building and strategic thinking, but actually there was an absence of influencing before I came here. So that top person along the line with the activator command and self-insurance, that happens to be me. But anyway, my point being is that the influencing was probably keeping our group from advancing pharmacy services here at Lee Memorial before I came here. And not that I'm not good in the relationship building, so I got some gaps there. But anyway, I think knowing your strengths is important, but knowing your team members' strengths is more important. And knowing your team members and where to place them and how to really utilize their skills is really a key to your success. And that's another one of my leadership philosophies. So next slide. So that's Strength Finders. I think select the team, know the team, develop the team, utilize the team, and then celebrate the team. Don't forget to celebrate the team. So don't forget to celebrate the team. So I've said that enough, other than I'll say it one more time. Don't forget to celebrate your team. I think really it's all about the team being successful. It's not about you as an individual being successful. I think you'll find a lot of individual success when you get the team success. So I got another Boilermaker in that corner. Kurtik, so what do you think? Should we talk about this?
Well, I don't have any direct comment to this. I think it's phenomenal, and I think it is really important, that celebration piece, because I think as leaders and pharmacists even, we get so caught up in the task completion and the outcome. We get to the outcome, and then we move on to the next one without celebrating it. And that celebration piece as part of the team is really critical as we keep momentum up, as we encourage our staff, and then as we develop our staff. So no direct comment, just really like that concept.
Okay. Well, let's move on just a little bit more. Next slide. So another thing that we do with our staff is find out the DISC analysis, and this is kind of like another way to dig in to find out a little bit more about the styles of the individuals that are on your team. Now, interestingly, we do this not only for our managers, we do it for other leader staff in our departments, which automatically means the clinical specialist, but it also goes down to any other individual staff member that is interested in doing this to be able to be a strong participant in the team. So, next slide. There is a free version on the web, by the way. You can get a little bit of an initial indicator about yourself. This happens to be me. If you couldn't tell, I'm a DI, a little bit on the dominance and a little bit on the influence, and I apologize for the negative sides of that, and it does have some negative sides, but I pretty much would agree with this reflection that I'm pioneering. I'm a little bit commanding, and but hopefully energizing as well. So I think that goes into being that activator, probably in that Strength Finders. But nevertheless, this is the kind of profile that depicts me. But I think it's more important, once again, to know your team members' strengths and what they need in regards to either being, deliberate or inclusive and those types of things. So, next slide. So, I think also leadership philosophy-wise, so kind of shifting gears about knowing yourself and knowing your team. I think the three major components to be successful in leadership is you've got to have vision, alignment, and execution. So, next slide. In regards to the vision, it's the work of leaders includes crafting a vision of new possibilities for the future through exploration, boldness, and testing assumptions. So I think really having that vision and getting, knowing where you want to go is really critical. Next. But after you got the vision, then you've got to get alignment. So leaders build that alignment through communicating with clarity, engaging in dialogue, providing inspiration, and so everyone is moving in the same direction. So, next slide. And finally, the execution phase, and I see failures happen at this level too. Finally, leaders need to champion execution through momentum, structure, and feedback to enable the group to capitalize on its talents while making the vision a reality. So really, the three of those components, next slide, Mary, I think that the keys are that you got to have that vision, alignment, execution really leads to success. John, any thoughts that you might have at this point?
Just maybe a quick question just a quick question maybe for you, John, or Bob, if he wants to chime in. What, if you were going to put a fourth factor in here, what would that fourth factor be?
Well, that's interesting on the fourth factor. I would go back to that celebration, to recognize what you've done as being good and really celebrate that aspect. I think we tend to kind of put it into our execution phase, so we put it in our announcements, our visibility, those types of things. But I don't know, that's my thought. Bob?
I agree with John. I agree with John Armistead. I think celebration is the fourth point. I asked the residents around the table, and they got shy, and they're not going to speak up. But what did you say? Evaluation was what? Rachel Hipp. Rachel Hipp says evaluation, so follow-up evaluation would also be one as well. But I think celebration is important as well. So those are our thoughts from you in my office.
No, I think that's excellent. That really goes along with the lean transformation philosophies of the constant reevaluation and then readjust the vision alignment. So it needs to be more circular than linear. So that's an excellent point. So good contribution there. Well, let's go on to the next slide, Mary. Okay, now this is a little bit of a complex slide, but I wanted to give you a perspective that I came to Lee Memorial Health System in 2010, so just 5 short years ago, and every day I'm just stuck on vacation down here in Southwest Florida. So, and by the way, if anybody is looking for a little break from the cold winters, feel free to contact me, and I got extra bedrooms, so feel free to let me know. Anyway, these are best practice goals, and what you see is basically 85 goals that we've had at Lee Memorial Health System in the pharmacy department in regards to things that we're working on. Now, if they are green, that indicates that they are 100% done if each individual goal is 100% done. So what this implies is we've got a dozen or maybe 15 of these that are still open. Now, we didn't open goals, so they're not yet completed. But every one of the goals that we've had that are significant, that involve multiple individuals, disciplines, automation, CPOE, smart pumps, going to codes, going to malignant hypothermia events, all those types of things came through consolidated as a SMART goal. And then it's not like we laid out all 85 when we first came, or when I first came, is that these develop over time from staff. And now our concept is if something's big, it's a big effort that we need to move towards, then we need to make it a best practice goal, and that creates the vision. And then we get alignment through multiple staff meetings or newsletters or just one-on-one communication. So that creates the alignment. And then our execution, we build plans to make sure that we execute those activities. So let's go to the next slide, because maybe it'll become more evident in my leadership philosophy. So here's a dial down on just best practice goal number 40. And number 40 happened to be taking pharmacists going to code blues. Now, when I first came in 2010, we did not go to any emergency events in the hospital or in the multiple hospitals. And taking an academic medical center in this direction is challenging enough, but that's well established. I would say in a community hospital, 24/7, each hospital being somewhere in the range of 250 to 370 beds, this was a challenge to do, and getting our people trained and able to cover the responsibilities of not only the codes, but our med calls, or medical emergency calls. So let's go to the next slide. So this is just one best practice goal. And what we do off of each one of those goals is we will create an action plan so our execution is well defined. And in this case, and I know you can't read it on the slide, but basically, let's go kind of, this is a depiction or a Gantt chart of what that is. But let's go to the next slide, because the first section is all the tasks that you need to do within that major goal of quote-unquote going to codes. Next slide. And the next section identifies who's accountable, who's responsible, who needs to be informed, and who do we need to communicate with in regards to every one of those single activities. So really laying out your plan so execution is almost it almost just happens when you lay out your plan so well. And the next slide indicates the time frames that are accomplished, and yellow is a little bit when you're falling a little bit behind your goal. Green is when you're on target. Red is when you've hit a snag and it's stopped, and so forth. So the idea here being that you got to come up with your vision, you got to come up with a way for alignment, And then finally, you need to really, in essence, execute, hopefully flawlessly, but even if it meets up into problems, you adjust and then you change the execution plan based upon what's happening. So next slide. So I think it goes back to what I mentioned earlier about knowing yourself, knowing your team, determining that direction, the priority, the plan, executing the plan, and then evaluating that status. So anyway, those are the thoughts that I could condense on leadership within a webinar's confines. Let's see, put another train there, Erdick. So your thoughts, and let's open it up for questions after that.
Absolutely. Well, John, I just want to thank you for some really nice insights on your philosophy on leadership, and it's really, I think it's interesting as a younger practitioner to look at some of those folks that have modified their philosophies over time and developed into something that really demonstrates their success. So we really appreciate that. I do have a question here that I will pose to you, and then Bob and anyone else who wants to chime in, but it's from Bridget, and she says, as younger practitioners, we are often encouraged to take advantage of many opportunities. How do we ensure that we get a good experience while still maintaining an appropriate work-life balance?
Well, that's a little bit of the secret to life kind of thing. I think you have to invest to your heart's content, and I reprioritize things and adjust things in my life. But I don't know. For example, I flew back from ASHP on Friday night. Got in at midnight and spent quality time with my wife, and took her out to dinner on that night. On that Saturday, but I worked in a round of golf on Sunday, and then I wound up flying back to ASHP Sunday afternoon. So I don't know, sometimes things might seem impossible, but I think part of the education you get in the residency is learning how to put the seemingly impossible things into possibilities. Anyway, good luck with that. I've been working on it for about 35 years.
Yeah, I think it's a question I get a lot. It's as residents and even younger practitioners, you want to say yes to as much as you can because you want to try to get as much great experience as you can. But if you say yes to everything, you're quickly going to run out of free time.
No, that's true. And I just brought this topic up at the Women in Pharmacy Leadership meeting that was held at ASHP on Monday. But I really do invest a lot into my professional life and career. On the other hand, I invest a lot into my personal life and career. And one of the measurements or yardsticks on success of that reminds me back when my daughter was a senior in high school, and she was a very, very good softball player. Matter of fact, she was an all-star in Kentucky for her junior and senior years. But anyway, my point being is that I made all 43 of her softball games her senior year. And I not only made those games, but I was the team photographer that year. And because I had that passion to be able to integrate my work life with my professional life so both would be successful. So it does take, I think it goes back to a little bit of what's left on this last slide. So in this case, know yourself and determine your direction, determine your priority, develop a plan, execute the plan, evaluate your status, when, and the answer is always.
So John, this is Bob. So I absolutely would echo that. I've done the same thing as well for my kids' events and made sure that I was there. I think the secret to balancing work and life is to lead with your strengths. I can't emphasize more that you find what you're good at and you lead with those strengths. If you lead and do things that you're good at and lead with your strengths, it will be easier for you to prioritize. It will be easier for you to do multiple things at once because you're good at it. So again, think about leading with your strengths, and you will find that your work life will become more in balance because you will be doing what you love every day.
Perfect. Well, I think we're coming up on about 2 or 3 minutes left here. John, do you want to see if they have one or two more questions for you?
I'm going to try to put Mick on the spot, because Mick, you're one of my mentors in my career, and my success is I've attributed much of my success to my consultation with you. What are your thoughts, if you're still with us?
Yes, I'm still with you.
Any thoughts or reflections?
No, I think that you've done a really good job there, John. I think one of the things that you have to do as you execute all these plans and things is, maybe have your initial evaluation in terms of, did we hit the target, then do some celebrating, but then you get into this unending cycle of, evaluating, tweaking, and things like that. John, can I ask you a question here?
Oh, sure.
I was wondering what different leadership challenges that you've encountered as ASHP president that may be different from your previous experience as a chief pharmacy officer.
Well, let's see. I'm still just getting into it, after installation in June. I would say my biggest thing is that actually I'm quieter as president than I've ever been before. So and what I've been emphasizing is, especially in that venue, is working on my listening skills to really try to find out what people are driving to as the priority. So I think that's been probably the toughest, as opposed to expressing my opinion. It's been listening to other perspectives.
Yeah, and different kinds of constituencies. Let me go back to the question you asked me about philosophy. One of the things that I think that I've really tried to focus on during my career is setting expectations, because I think people want to succeed, and I think that they want to do well, but there just has to be this communication in terms of what is expected. And I think that people will strive to achieve that once you reach agreement on what that expectation is. So setting expectations, I think, has been a big part of my career in pharmacy administration.
Absolutely.
This is John. I'm going to just jump in because I think we had another comment too, and that's really helpful, Mick. I appreciate that. Jacob Thompson, I think, had his hand raised and maybe wanted to share a thought or two. Jake, are you there? Maybe having some trouble with his audio. But Jake, if you do have a comment, please feel free to type it in, and we'll take a look at it. Are there any other thoughts for John Armistead?
Well, it sounds like we got a relatively quiet group today, but anyway, I do want to add one more thing on those best practice goals. I do know that occasionally we do call a timeout and do some strategic planning. Matter of fact, we do it in the form of, it's kind of integrated with PPMI, which, by the way, is going to be reintroduced as PAI for pharmacy or for Practice Advancement Initiative. So watch for that in the near future. But nevertheless, I think it's important to revise your strategic plan on a regular basis to include new initiatives in that process. And that's what our best practice goals are. We started with about 10, and we probably have 10, somewhere between 10 and 20 goals in progress open at any one time. But one of the things that we have consistently done is that if we come up with a best practice goal, which once again is vision crystallized and alignment confirmed, it leads to absolute execution. Sometimes we're a little bit slower than we want to be. Usually IS slows us, the information systems department slows us down the most. But nevertheless, we execute that. And so they become a reality once we, I think dreams are nice, but they're not great for action. I think you really come up with a goal, crystallize it, and then you get alignment, and then you execute it. And I think that's similar to your own personal or your own leadership philosophy, is don't keep it in your mind as an idea, as a fleeting idea. You need to really crystallize it as a concept. So seek out other input from other individuals to make sure it's on target to where it should be going. And then good luck in the rest of your life, but go execute it. And that might be a lifelong journey, but I think really just having a philosophy in your head without a plan on paper or electronic in today's world is where most people fail. So I encourage you all to put it down on paper and be successful. And I'm glad to participate in this program and thankful for this opportunity.
Well, I know we are coming up on time here, and so I do want to be respectful of everyone's time. John, Jake did send that one last question, and quickly, what software do you use to track your goals, and then how do you celebrate? I don't know if you want to share just one or two quick thoughts on that before we wrap up.
Well, software, I mean, it's all on PowerPoint, and I think and same thing with the Gantt chart. That I use the poor man's Gantt chart. It's just all on Excel. And the reason I do that is because I find if you got specialized software, then you're the holder of that specialized software and you can't communicate it with everybody. So ours are all PowerPoint and Excel because everybody's got those on a computer. They can click on it, they can see it. It shows up in multiple things. We, especially with the multi-site health system, the fact that people can pull it up, show it, integrate it into their slide deck for their staff meetings or whatever, or tweak it is just that's priceless. I would discourage you to have, unless you had a major construction project, stay away from overly detailed Gantt chart because then you might be spending too much time documenting it as opposed to executing your plan.
Perfect. Well, John, I know we're a little past time. I do want to thank you on behalf of the young alumni of this program and all programs listening in. Really appreciate your insight, and then also want to thank all the attendees for joining, those that participated. Really appreciate your insight. I think I'll turn it back over to Bob to see if he had any closing thoughts on behalf of the LLP.
Sure. Thank you, John. And again, I wanted to thank Mary Vincent for helping to organize the webinar. I wanted to thank John Hertig for the vision that John has brought to this. And then lastly, thank John Armitstead. Yes, we are the awesome class of 1982, which also includes Jeff Beret. And I'm very proud to call John a friend and a colleague. And I just wanted to publicly thank you, John, for the advice and the leadership that you have given to this program. And we are 100% behind you as you assume your presidency in ASHP. I hope everybody has a safe day today, and we look forward to the next webinar, which is in 2 weeks. Please have that on your calendar and encourage your friends and colleagues to join in, your residents as well, and have a good night and go Bucks.